Have you ever wondered how a humble, uneducated fisherman from a backwater region like Galilee could go on to become one of the most adored and revered figures in all of human history? I've wondered about that, and that's why I'm in pursuit of Peter, the Apostle. I've spent most of my career studying Paul and his influence on Christianity. Now, I'm turning to Peter. I'm traveling to the land where his formation from humble fisherman to the Bishop of Rome took place. And I'm discovering for myself the places he influenced. Swim in? Is the water nice?
Oh, we have piranhas here.
Really?
Yeah.
Piranhas, really? Following his path of most unlikely transformation. I'm Con Campbell, and I'm in pursuit of Peter. Our pursuit of Peter begins about 2,000 years ago here at the Sea of Galilee in northern Israel. But for something called the sea, I'm wondering, where's the rest of it? It's really not that big, is it? The Sea of Galilee is only about 13 miles long and 8 miles wide. In Peter's time, it was home to a thriving fishing industry. Some estimate there are as many as 230 boats on the water each day during the first century. Apparently, bumper-to-bumper traffic is nothing new. Is it nice to swim in? The water? Yeah, is the water nice?
Oh, we have piranhas here.
Really?
Yeah.
Piranhas, really?
No.
I'm a gullible Westerner. What's with that? Our boat captain David knew he could have some fun with us. We weren't his typical awestruck pilgrims crossing the lake as though the water itself were holy. You going to show me what it's like to fish traditionally?
I'd love to, yeah.
Peter was a fisherman, and so was his brother Andrew. This is what you get the tourists to do? And this was tough work, hauling the nets, sailing primitive boats, and then selling the fish at market. Some fishermen used smaller throwing nets at times, and, well, of course I had to have a go. 3. The fish are safe with me. My mother's family's from a small Greek island, and the way they used to fish after World War II was just throw a grenade in the water. To be a fisherman competing for the best spots, Peter had to be strong-willed, and apparently he was more than that too. He's portrayed in the Bible as an act now, think later sort of person. He's blunt, he's passionate. Oh, that's cool. Which is great most of the time. Yet, despite Peter's rough edges, Jesus would eventually come along and invite him to become part of his inner circle of disciples.
I'll just do that show. Great. Now I'll put it in neutral.
Peter isn't actually Peter's original name. His birth name was Simon, which is often forgotten. This is a beautiful big eucalyptus tree, which reminds me of my homeland, Australia, where eucalyptus trees are native, and apparently they were introduced from there to here in Israel. But I'm not here for the tree, I'm here for the Jordan River, which is just over there. And I'm at the north end of the Jordan River, which is close to where Peter grew up and his home and where he worked and lived. Now we know that John the Baptist exercised his ministry up and down the Jordan River, so he would have been up in these parts at some point. And I think it's likely that Peter became associated with John the Baptist's ministry when John was in Peter's region. But the important connection that's made at the Jordan River is the one between Peter and Jesus. This is where they meet for the very first time. And it is an encounter that will entirely change Peter's life forever. Fortunately, I arrived just before the afternoon winds picked up. I'd crossed the Sea of Galilee to a quiet beachfront called En-Gev. I was told on the boat that almost every afternoon air currents rush down from the surrounding hills, churning up the water. Much of the shoreline around the Sea of Galilee remains relatively natural and undeveloped. And that made it easier to imagine how this area looked to Peter.
So you'd like some water, is that right?
I've discovered that good guides will always know two things: where to find food and where the restrooms are.
Okay.
Eitan's a guide who leads pilgrims on tours throughout the Holy Land, and he's good. So he knows that I'd be up for some ice cream. I always like to try the local flavors. One of chocolate, one of bubblegum.
Okay.
I think the two names Simon and Peter are like two sides of his personality. Exploring just how Peter would come to understand those differences is part of the rest of his story.
Thank you very much.
Toda.
Have a nice day.
Toda.
Eitan offers some additional perspectives about the Sea of Galilee and Peter's neighborhood. And he also lives near the lake, close to where Peter grew up. This is a lake, but it's known as the Sea of Galilee.
In the Hebrew language, there's no word for a lake. Go to the Dead Sea. There is a river entry and no exit at all.
Okay.
And yet we call it Sea of Salt, Sea of Death, the Dead Sea.
So they didn't distinguish between a lake and a sea.
There's not any word to distinguish.
Yeah. So even though we may call this the Sea of Galilee, it's a lake.
It is a lake,
Yeah.
no doubt. But you find it under the name of the sea. Sea of Tiberias, Sea of Galilee, Sea of Gennesaret, and even Peniel. That's another name.
Peniel,
Peniel,
meaning
face of God.
the face of
the
God.
beauty of the lake.
This area is where Peter was active.
He was a
Capernaum,
fisherman.
Bethsaida. Is there still much fishing that goes on?
There is fishing. Right
Yeah.
now you don't see any fishing boats because the lake is on a rest by the government.
Really?
It's the hatching season, so
they wanted to replenish the fish
yeah.
supply.
Yeah, but
Okay.
but good fish. The tilapia,
Mm-hmm.
which we know under the name St. Peter fish.
Uh-huh.
But if you go to a supermarket, you buy that fish, you look for amnoon,
Okay.
that's the Hebrew name, or tilapia.
Tilapia, yeah.
But if you look for tilapia in other places in the world, it's tilapia from China,
Yeah,
from
sure.
fish farms. In nature, this is the only place in the world.
Really?
Yeah, that kind of tilapia.
And it's connected with Peter because he was active in this area, Bethsaida,
He was
Capernaum, not far
active.
away.
Yeah, we are not far from Capernaum, the other side of the lake, Bethsaida over here.
Yeah.
And he was the fisherman.
As a guide, Eitan's made so many laps across and around this lake, you'd think he'd grow tired of it. But he still loves showing people this region. So I got VIP treatment riding with Eitan as we headed north about 10 miles, following the eastern shoreline to where Peter grew up. The New Testament tells us that Bethsaida was the hometown of both Peter and his brother Andrew.
We're here.
It also had a Roman presence, with the Greek language commonly spoken. When you see this region and Bethsaida's remote location, it seems unlikely and kind of surprising that Jesus would have chosen men from here, so far from Jerusalem, the spiritual center of the nation of Israel. They were nobodies from nowhere. The thing I'm confused about is we're not super close to the lake. So it seems a strange location for fishermen.
It is a strange theory or suggestion to say that the fishermen lived here on the hill that is so far from the lake. To my opinion, the value of this location was mainly because it's by the river. I don't know, it's as stupid as any other speculation.
Right. Eitan's got a sense of humor talking about some historical theories, but he has a point. And recently, excavations have opened up an alternate location for Bethsaida, close to where the Jordan River enters the Sea of Galilee. Peter grew up here and married a woman from Capernaum about 3 miles
Yeah,
closer
beyond the river.
beyond the river, on the other side of the river. And it's right on the water, it's still on the water. And one theory is that he moved there for maybe tax reasons?
It could be.
Less heavily
These
taxed.
were two different regions.
Yeah.
Everyone had to pay tax, but maybe tax over there was easier.
Or, since we know that Peter's mother-in-law was in
Was
Capernaum,
there. So maybe he was
he went over there to marry
to
his
marry
woman.
his fiancée. Yeah.
Yeah, so either a woman or money.
Maybe
What else has
maybe
changed?
the dowry is cheaper over there.
Okay, so both. The woman and the money. Yeah, that's a win-win.
And it's by the lake. You don't need to schlep the boat every night up on the
That's
hill.
right. That's right. Yes, fairly
Okay.
shrewd. Yeah, that
Yeah.
could be that's a plausible reconstruction for sure. Yeah.
Unlike Bethsaida, Capernaum is a distinctly conservative, observant Jewish community. And that sense of Jewish community and Jewish nationalism might also have been a strong motivation for Peter to move there. Remember, Peter had heard about John the Baptist, and John sounded a lot like the kind of revolutionary who could possibly throw off Roman rule and restore the glory days of Israel.
That was why John was so popular, I think, and why the Jordan was so important for John's ministry, because he wanted to see a renewed Israel. Not a replaced Israel with something else, but a renewed Israel. I mean, John is a huge figure in his day. He's much better known than Jesus initially. He's got this huge ministry, and he really is quite famous. And people come from all over to see him and partake in his ministry.
To understand more about the influence of John the Baptist, whom people were calling a new prophet from God, I went south to Jerusalem on a very busy day in the city. It seems that every other week there's a holiday when either no one is in the streets or everyone is. This seems like a holiday. I need to check my calendar more often. Eventually I made it to the Tower of David Museum. It actually has nothing to do with King David, but it sounds good on the tourist brochures. And its foundations do go back to the time of Peter and Jesus. I rendezvoused with Dr. Paul Wright from Jerusalem University College.
Con Campbell. Nice to see you.
The college teaches the historical, cultural, and geographical settings of the Bible.
John the Baptist, his ministry was not in Jerusalem, obviously, but at the Jordan River. Why there and not here, which seems to be the center of religious activity?
There's something about wilderness that brings out the essence of who people are. You know, it's a place that resources are very thin, but faith has to be very deep at the same time. And it brings out things in people that can be covered over up in Jerusalem, where life can be comfortable and easy. I think that John...
Paul brought a map to locate where John was preaching and baptizing in relation to Jerusalem.
Jerusalem in the high hill country, Jericho, the oasis down in the Rift Valley. There's about a 10-mile road here following a ridge dropping about 4,000 feet in elevation. We read in the Gospel of John that John the Baptist was baptizing at Bethany beyond the Jordan. Tradition identifies that here, about 5 miles out.
Okay.
Looks flatter, but it's also pretty tough.
Tough
about
in
as
what way?
Tough, about as arid as you can imagine. And the ground has these very soft soil and cliff lines. You have to go down and up and down and up.
Oh.
It's a tough journey.
So you're going to be pretty committed to get down
You
there.
have to be very committed to
Right.
get down there, exactly.
What about merchants along the way? Would they provide food and water for travelers? Or?
People are traveling on the road, typically of all different kinds of people. Typically, if you were going, you'd bring your own stuff.
Okay.
There's no fast food places or anything.
Right.
And one spot in particular, right about here actually on the route, where we know there's it was called Pepinka watering hole. So a place for pilgrims to stop and get something to drink as
Literally
well.
a watering
Literally,
hole,
well,
not a pub.
yeah, exactly. They would have had to bring the water up from the spring down below.
What about going back up? It must have been a nightmare.
Yep, tough stuff.
While I was in Jerusalem, I wanted to explore more about John's influence on Peter's life and on the Jewish people. So I made my way to the other side of town, where it was much less busy. Must not be a holiday in this neighborhood. I met up with Claire Farn, Academic Dean of the University of the Holy Land. I'm trying to get a feel for the world that Peter lived in, and the first time we encounter Peter is in connection with John the Baptist.
When we read about John the Baptist, I don't think that we're taking seriously how large his movement was. The very place where they set up their community, just at the northern end of the Dead Sea, just south of Jericho, is a highly charged prophetic region in Israel's history.
Okay.
This is where Moses, on the opposite side, looks over and sees the promised land.
Right.
This is where Israel crosses over.
Right.
This is where the school of prophets is established in Jericho.
Okay.
This is where Elijah disappears up into the whirlwind.
Right.
So in Israel's history, this is a highly, it's
Really
almost like a
significant spot. Yeah.
magnetic,
Right.
core of
Right.
prophetic energy. And for this Baptistic preacher, what is Baptistic? It means that he emphasizes ritual immersion, John the Baptist. For him to emerge in that area would make a connection in the minds of his hearers with the prophecy that promised that God would send the spirit of Elijah before the great and powerful day of the Lord.
Now I think because of the political history of Israel, Simon Peter would have been attracted to John the Baptist, which makes sense given the history of his name. Simon Peter. Simon was a very common name, of course, and probably named after Simon Maccabeus. Do you think?
Yes, I do.
Yeah.
I completely agree with you. The Maccabees are the heroes, and every girl named Miriam and is named for the Hasmonean princess, and all the guys, Eleazar, Judah, etc., are named for.
And what's the
Maccabees.
significance of the Maccabeans for Jews in the first century?
The Maccabean revolt for Jews in the first century was the closest living memory of political independence.
Right.
And it represented a renewed hope for the day when God would establish an independent Israel with a Davidic king who would overthrow the Roman oppressors, who would create a utopia of what Jewish life should be.
Right. For someone like Peter, I think Peter has a political revolution. That's what he seems to be looking for, at least initially. Would he have seen John the Baptist in that light?
Yes, because John the Baptist was unafraid to preach righteousness against corrupt political authority, against oppression, against immorality. He has a Galilean ministry, and the focus of his political discussion and discourse is against a Galilean ruler, Herod Antipas.
Okay.
And John the Baptist spoke out against Herod's corruption. He spoke out against the fact that he had married his brother's ex-wife. And this reached a boiling point, which led to his arrest. It was his preaching against this political, immoral state of affairs that led to the arrest and imprisonment and ultimately the death of John the Baptist.
So it would be easy to see John in those political terms then, especially if someone like Peter is looking for a political revolution. But as we see later on, the kingdom of God that Jesus introduces is quite different from what Peter is expecting.
It takes so long for the disciples to get it that we hear that very funny question that they ask after the resurrection in Acts chapter 1, when they say, okay, so finally, now are you going to set up the kingdom? And he says, it's not about that.
Yeah, that's right.
And it really is a reflection of their fervent desire. They haven't given up hope for political independence.
Yeah.
It's beautiful stuff.
Yeah. John the Baptist was the connecting point for Simon Peter to meet Jesus. John declared Jesus essentially to be the Messiah, and from that time on, Jesus was on Peter's radar. Little did Peter know that meeting Jesus would dramatically alter the course of his entire life, and it began with a name change. Jesus gave Simon the name Peter, which means rock.
Jesus is going to redefine who Peter is. As we follow Peter's story, we'll see that he becomes a completely different man. And it begins with the name change.
It's a name that would cast a vision for who Peter could be. Stable, strong, and secure. A rock. Just the kind of man that would be needed for those who would soon follow Jesus too. And that's why Peter's story is so intriguing, or maybe even inspiring to me. It seems that no matter how much I've studied, I'm still working out what it means to follow Jesus.